everyone. My name is Will Rogers. I am the I'm director of artistic programs at Arizona Theater Company, and we are so glad that you're joining us today. Thank you for being here. I hope that you all got a chance to see the live benefit reading of The White Ship, written by our very own Sean Daniels, our artistic director, and performed by the amazing off-Broadway cast last night. But if you've missed it, that recording of the recording of that reading will be online on our Facebook and on our YouTube through Friday. So please take a moment, check out that video, and then join us here at 4 o'clock every day. We will be entering into different conversations with members of our community, both theater and the recovery community, and that's what we're here to do today. So we are lucky to be joined by Dr. Katie Kime. I'm gonna bring her on up. Katie, will you join me?
Hello.
Hi. Nice to see your face again.
Yes.
So you've had a very long history with this play. You were with it from its world premiere, I believe, at Merrimack Repertory Theater. At least you knew of it since then. You saw the production. Can you tell us a little bit about how, and you used it as the centerpiece of your thesis, right? So tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah. So I was, so back up 4 years ago, I was at Emory University and getting a PhD in religion. And Emory is also the place where the CDC is. We're hearing a lot of CDC in the news. And Emory has a history and a strength in sort of looking at religion from a public health perspective, both how religion can help and hurt public health issues. And I found it fascinating over and over again that across social and social scientific and medical literature, there is a consistent correlation between spirituality and religion in some way and sustained recovery from addiction. And but telling the story, telling that story in creative new ways and having sustained research across all the various silos is not something that's still happening all that well. So I am not a theater person. I am a theater appreciator. But in my house is my husband is Haddon Kime, and he writes musicals and has deep history in Boston theater scene, and then now here in Atlanta. He had heard of White Chip, and some of his friends were blah blah blahing, and I said, what, and just to hear even the plot of the White Chip. And so I found funding to just pay for a flight in the dead of January and get to Boston, and then get a car to Merrimack Theater. Hadn't met Sean before, just knew that I had to get to a performance and see how he was telling the story. And I was so not disappointed. Because what White Chip does, what is so compelling about it, there's so many things that are compelling about the story itself, but was that it tells the story of how important it is for us to honor how the person doing the impossibly excruciating work of recovering from an addiction, alcoholism, or any sort of substance use disorder, when they're doing that work, how they are making meaning, how they are putting together their sense of self, how they are understanding the pain that's happening to them. It's so important to really respect the subjectivity, sort of the piece that's unique to how a person's consciousness puts things together. It's really important to honor that. And it's super interesting that neuroscience and just talking and thinking about our brains, that's really new, actually. Even setting aside the actual science itself, how people in recovery talk about their recovery, the fact that they're using words about their brain is new in the last 20 or so years. So that's a long answer to your question.
That's really interesting. Like, what would they have said before?
So that's what I'm so glad you asked. So the research I did, it was a small research study with subjects. I was allowed to, just in terms of the IRB official rules, I was allowed to reveal Sean's identity since he's a public figure and gave his permission. Everyone else is anonymous. But I listened over and over and over again to people just telling their stories, which for folks in recovery, for most, it would say the most people who've sustained recovery over 2 or 3 years, telling the story of their recovery is pretty familiar. Just culturally, that tends to be mostly true. And I noticed a difference for folks who had initiated their recovery more than 10 years ago, no matter their age. I had all sorts of ages compared to the folks who had initiated their recovery less than 10 years ago, which would include Sean. There was a fascinating difference in the way that saying words like brain wiring and my brain and neurochemical, even that word, it was across levels of education, it was across race, across all these things. It was important for folks who'd started recovery less than 10 years ago to include those kinds of words. They had all sorts of conclusions about that, all sorts of levels of religiosity, all sorts of ways that they described it, but including those elements, talking about their brain as a second entity or as sometimes different than me and my brain, which is how Sean put some meaning together as he was recovering. That was really important. So, to answer your question, how did they do it before? For instance, one of my subjects who sustained his recovery more than 10 years ago, he preferred to think of it as an allergy, and he could tell you all sorts of things about what recovery was for him, but not just allergy, like it was that it was medical, and the medicalization of alcohol and substance abuse that's been going on for a while. That's part of what distinguished Alcoholics Anonymous was a rising sense of the medical nature of what addiction and alcoholism are. But to include brain in there is different. So
That's so interesting. It's interesting to think about how um, little time that conversation's been around. If you really like,
yeah, it really
yeah,
is. Yeah. And if you think about like back in I mean, I'd say, well, so I mean, I'm getting older and older. We all are getting older and older, but like those
that's
of us who can remember the this is your brain on drugs,
I'm one of those.
that's the first time. And that was like early 90s, right? That we saw that and it was your brain on drugs that they were talking about, right?
Yeah,
And so it's been about since the early 90s that talking about brain as a sense of ourselves is in the way that we do now. Now you certainly could say, hey, you know what, like the people have known for a long time across cultures and maybe two different levels that the brain is where a lot of really important things happen for humans, and certainly throughout the 20th century we've known that. I'm not saying that that's new, but associating it so directly with our experience of addiction and recovery, which is one of the most complex and excruciating things a human can experience. It really is so terrible. It's and baffling, right? Because it's a person making a choice over and over again to be self-destructive, right? So it has long been confounding and misery making, having a huge effect on not just the person suffering from addiction, but all the people who are affected by the ways that person will burn financial, family, job, just burn through bridge after bridge, endanger things that are very valuable to them, even their children.
yeah,
Not every time, not every person, but that that can happen, and it's baffling.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, in a few minutes we'll bring the people on who brought the story to life last night.
Yeah.
But before we do, you like I said, you've seen all the productions. Did you see it off Broadway as well?
No.
Okay, so you saw the Merrimack Repertory production.
Yes.
You saw that original production. You saw the reading last night. Did
Yeah.
you kind of have any like new takeaways, like or new
Oh
realizations about
gosh.
it?
I mean, the tragedy is that and my job is actually in New York, but I just never was there for those 3 weeks. It was off Broadway. But so I didn't get to see that. But the most fascinating thing to me was when I compare my experience of seeing it for the Merrimack production, and then I mean, watching the character Stephen's face as I mean, for me, I'll just betray the fact that my favorite scene is the one where it's the one that's the character Stephen calls the strange time when he wakes up that Sunday morning and is sweating. It's that I mean, I think that that's just like a pivot point And it's no one could have written that who hasn't survived an addiction use disorder, a substance use disorder, an addiction. I mean, that is someone who's been through it. I can't speak from the experience of someone who has. I've had people near and dear to me who have, but it's not an experience I've had. But so to answer your question, last night, watching the character Steven's face up close as he went through that was like, I mean, I was like, just I had chills head to toe, and I thought, oh, maybe I could have gotten that if I was on the very front row in the Merrimack production, but like, I don't know.
Maybe we're
I
in this
did,
group where all we have the best of theater, the best of television.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of questions I'm dying to ask the cast.
Okay, well, great.
Yeah.
Well, then why don't we just go ahead and bring the cast in. Joining us today is Joe Tapper. Joe, come on in. Genesis Oliver. Oh, we're all just gonna come on. Come on in. Infinity Steves, right? Am I saying that right?
Yes, yes, you are. Awesome. Yes.
And I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Dr. Kime, and I'm going to depart the conversation.
Well, you all, I am just totally honored and a little bit fangirling, gonna be honest, kind of fangirling, because I love this play and then watching what you all did. So I also am gonna confess some naivete here. I thought, oh, they're saying it's live, like they're pressing play live. I didn't realize you all achieved that performance like actually live. What?
I think there's part of us that can't believe it either.
Yeah. I don't think it quite sunk on me when it was over that it had happened live. Yeah. Like and it's not like you can, like in a play, like for, I don't know if any of y'all have that experience either, but when you get to like maybe like you have 10 to 5 pages left of the play, any play you're in, you're like, okay, we're home. But like with this, it's like, no, we're not home until the last word is said, because buffering or the internet or anything could just happen, you know. But as I'm told, I don't know, that didn't happen, which is just wild. And yeah, it was live. It was very live with 200 plus cues and a stage manager in Tallahassee calling the cues to the technical director in Jersey City, New Jersey, and he was very involved, and the sound designer was in Los Angeles. And Finn, you're on 50th Street. Genesis, you're in Queens. I'm in Brooklyn. Our ASM was in Minnesota. It was a heck of it. And then more and more other people all over. They're all escaping me right now, but it was
that is immense. That is immense.
I was telling my husband just before it started, I said, you know, for theater, there's the thrill of doing it live, you know, which is always like your heart is kind of in your neck a little bit. But I was like, it didn't hit me till I kind of kissed them and said, you know, I'm going in, you know, which is weird. And I said, it's so weird because even though I, you know, love and trust this team, we're not in the same room. You know, it's just so, normally you're like, okay, it's theater, like we're going to do it and we're going to do it. But this was like, we're not in the same room, but we're in the same virtual room. But so that was just a really strange free fall.
Yeah.
Well, I have more questions about the performance part actually, but I also just want to hear from each of you, sort of like, just, you know, say like how you came to this performance and sort of what it meant to you in October when you're performing it, and just your journey, who you are, and how you journeyed to the play. Who wants to go first? Joe, you want to go first?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Genesis, why don't you go? We haven't heard from you yet. Genesis, go ahead.
No, so I just I got it. Like you get most things. You kind of get an email, and it's like, hey, there's this new play. Would you like to go in for it? You give it a read. But the very fun thing and like amazing thing that started to happen was like I knew who Sean was because I actually was an apprentice. The first year he was the associate artistic director at Actors Theater of Louisville. So like, I'm like, 20, 21 or whatever. And, he comes in and I remember him, but like what I don't remember is actually any of that stuff going on, or at least like I never like, you know, and I was in my own world, of course, but like, so to be sitting there reading it for the first time and kind of being like, wait a minute, I was like around for that. And then years, I mean, we're talking like 10 years later to then come to, so like my journey to the play is just kind of just like, I can't believe I get to, it's just one of those things about this life that you kind of go like, wow, it's not maybe why I chose it, but it's one of the benefits of like, oh man, like I came around and I'm here with this now. And so it's just really kind of incredible.
It's incredible.
Mm.
Finnerty, you want to share?
Sure. I similar. I had the audition sort of came through, and I've always wanted to work with Cheryl, and so I was super excited about it. But I don't know what happened, but for some reason there wasn't a lot of time with the material, and I love the play, but I've just gotten to a point where like if I don't feel like I could do something well in the amount of time, so I remember telling my agent like, because we're supposed to come in with 3 characters and like there was just so much, and I just didn't want to. I didn't want to half-ass it, you know. Like I was just I was so I never do this, but I called my agent. I was like, I don't know if I've had enough time. Like I feel like I need more time. And Cheryl said to come in anyway. I'm like, okay, as long as she does, you know. And I never do that, but I was so comfortable in the room. I loved the play, and to be honest, when I first started it, I was like, oh, I don't really like these kind of plays. When I first started it, because I don't like sort of like, and now I'm this guy, like I don't really like with that stuff, like, you know. So I'm like, when I saw that I'd be playing like multiple, I was like, okay, well, we'll see. And then I was like, oh my God, this is Sean's sense of, separate from his story, which is just incredible, but the way he undercuts the you know, the heavy moments with humor, I was like, oh my God, this is so special. Just such a special play. So I'm so glad that I went, but that's how I came to it. But yeah.
Mine was a little different. I had gotten a text one afternoon from a mutual friend of Sean's and myself, a great writer, both TV, film, and he's a great playwright, named Christopher Oscar Pena, and he's said, hey, are you available on these, sent me a screenshot, are you available for this? And at the time I wasn't. I had something that conflicted, and I was like, I'm not available, but okay. I was not available, but I'll read it. I'll read the play because he said you should read the play. It's really amazing. So I said I'll read the play because you're a close friend and I trust you. So I read the play in like that afternoon, which is like I have a little child, like I have a 2.5-year-old at that time, and reading a play in an afternoon is like I have to get clearance for something like that. I have to get like permission. There has to be like codes sent in. There has to be like, you know, there's got to be like multiple, you know,
sign-offs.
So I read it in the afternoon and I flew through it. I ripped through it, and there's like multiple like coincidences in that play too. I am also sober. That's why my friend reached out to me, was like, hey, I think this could be a match for you, because I am in recovery too. At that time I was sober for 7 years. Yes, 7 years at that time. So I read that, and there was some parallels between Sean's story and mine. One of them at the time was when it's revealed that Sean and his mom share the same sobriety date. So that, which is true. That happens in so that's not, my mom and I don't share the same sobriety date.
I was going to say, I was about to be like,
but one of my closest friends, who was my sponsor, is somebody who I reached out to when I was trying to get sober. I said, hey, listen, I got to stop drinking. I think I got to stop drinking right now. And he said, oh, okay, I stopped drinking today. X many years ago, and I think it's an amazing thing. So I stopped drinking that day, and he'd stopped drinking that day, and we share the same day, and it's our day together. So the fact that like
Wow.
that's like this weird thing. So I was like, whoa, the universe is saying. So I
Yeah.
called the people, and then there was a couple other things, and I called the people that you call, and I said, hey, I think I gotta kick. We gotta kick the tires on this. And
Hmm.
I loved Cheryl. I'd met Cheryl a few times. I loved her work. And I ended up it ended up happening. So and then I met Genesis, and I was there for his audition, and I mean,
Right.
it was amazing. And yeah, and it was kind of like just incredible the whole way through. But it was great. But yeah, that was a long
Thank
answer.
you.
That was a long answer.
No, that's awesome. That's fantastic and incredible. The synchronicities and synergies and whoa, those are worth paying attention to for sure. And one question I remember Sean saying about the Merrimack production, or just one observation was that they had a few performances where they bought out the house was bought out for only folks who were in recovery, and sometimes it was folks who were recently in recovery, and even it was folks who hadn't experienced professional theater before. Like Sean would say, they thought it was a screen, like, and they would just like talk right back at it, like forget the, But I'm just wondering, in general, any observations y'all had about the audiences, just as performers. You've experienced so many audiences over your careers already, and what did you experience about these audiences that seemed different, or maybe not, but just curious?
Um, I would say people were well, yeah, people were impacted. I had a lot of people reach out to me. Like I had a lot of friends or people who knew me, and also knew that I had struggled to get sober, or knew of me, knew my wife, and knew that we had um, she had helped me get sober. So there was always like kind of when I'd come out afterwards, there was always kind of a like it just like a lot of hugging, a lot of hugging
Yeah.
for those, and then but really beautiful. And then like I'd hear from people days later. I think it stuck with a lot of people in ways, and also like I think a lot of people experience a lot of joy. I think what's really great about the play is that it recovers. Like you
Yeah.
go through something, but it does recover itself. It's about recovery. So I did have people say, "Oh, how can you do this 2 days in a row?" Well, I had no problem ever doing it 2 days in a row. I had no problem doing it ever. I don't know if you all had that experience either. I had no problem ever doing the play because it always recovered itself.
Yeah.
The journey was always up. It was not down. It wasn't like doing the Pillow Man, or something. Was just like, like or
So funny you say that. That is the most depressing play I've ever seen in my life ever. And I haven't even seen that many plays, but I've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah. But so there the journey was up. The journey was okay. It's okay. It's all gonna be great. It can happen. So that was, it was always ended out on a good. So I thought there was joy, and yeah, the audience they were good. They were good. Yeah. It was New York audiences, so they came to the theater. They wanted to be there, but so.
But there would be sometimes we come off and go, oh, did you see the guy that sweet guy in the second row? We're like, yeah, just you could tell it was hitting some people really heavily. Yeah.
Yeah, someone who hasn't really been, honestly, for me, this is as entrenched as I've been in terms of like addiction and learning about AA and like and I, you know, just the idea, just seeing people respond to whatever different moments in the play, that was just a totally different experience for me. You're used to people, like, if you got something good going on, people are reacting or they're, but the way you could, because we were actually pretty close to people, like Finn said, like, I don't think I've ever kind of dealt with a subject that you could see someone maybe even like reliving their moments, like in the moment, right? You know, like, and that to me was like really special. You know?
Yeah, that's incredible. Um, can I ask what your favorite, like, and this, don't know if this applies, but like, I've heard some performers say that like they have some, you have some moments you're like really look forward to playing in a performance. Did you have some that each night you're like, yeah, I love that part?
I mean, definitely Brit for me is just like, you know, I get to kind of go
It's
big
so
and like,
great. Oh my God.
and it was a part that I was like trying to be, you know, it's like, you know, Cheryl was really great, helping me bring that along, because like they were just, I was having some difficulty with it for various reasons, and not crazy, but just like in terms of like, it's so quick, boom, bam, bam. And it's like honestly one of the characters I play the longest. You know, everyone else is like Finn was saying, like, you know, hat, whatever. So, but like it was just, you know, once you, and especially inside a play like this, once you get an opportunity to just do it and get in front of people, and like because we're dealing with comedy and like, you know, it's like the night, whenever the night was that we kind of found, or I kind of found it, and you hear that response, and you know that it was like, oh, like now I'm like looking forward to this like every time, you know, it's something I can't wait to get to, you know.
Yeah, I loved playing mom, but of course it was like, you know, some heavier stuff. But I must say, like, the character that I kind of connected with more, I mean, all of them, but I love to play JC, even though she doesn't really have any laughs. There's something about her that felt, that fit me like a glove, in the sense that like, that's kind of like her like optimistic energy, and that kind of person who is sometimes thinking she's helping and sometimes enabling. And, you know, there's something about that JC that I just liked. Every night felt like I could play her forever. Some of the other ones were, you know, fun, different nights for different, you know, and like even when we were playing like Stuart, and, you know, like playing that was always really fun, but it was hard to look at Joe's face sometimes, because like if you did anything different or emphasize a different word, like, you know, you could just see in Joe's eyes the little, and it would be hard, you know, that was always fun.
It wasn't fair because, you know, he wasn't facing the audience, so he could you know.
There's a one moment where I wasn't facing the audience. Right?
So we're just trying not to die, you know, every time before, you know, whatever we rehearsed it before the show, it would just be like, I don't know how we're gonna make it. Like, you know.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I would say I really like the part of the play that you spoke about earlier. The part of the part in the room. I've always really liked like that part.
You nail that. I'm just gonna be real subjective here and just say you nail that.
Thank you.
What?
Very nice of you to say. I like that part. I like that part because I struggle with spirituality and those subjects, and I certainly know, like I said, being an alcoholic, I struggle with the voices and saying like, oh, that look, you know, those things. So that, and being proud of just not thinking about drinking. So that, but I really, really like the moment of starting to count the days, day 70, day 72, day 1072, day 1170, because I remember those days, personally. So I remember what it was like to get to day 90. I just I'll never forget that, and I'll never forget. So there's and what, just how much those days matter to me, you know, like and that was boy, got really emotional yesterday. I don't need to get emotional tonight. But just like from that moment on, counting all those days to the wedding, it's just like this really release of just joy and questions, and talking about like can science and religion exist together, and I really and the story of Job and getting everything back. That's like my favorite. I really like that part, because when I think about that story of Job and getting everything back, I think about I think about the character, but then when I think about like every alcoholic and what we all get, and for me, like when I think about my family and all those things, it's very moving.
Yep.
Sean's words are very moving for me, overwhelming. So.
Yeah. Well, we have a fantastic question from the audience. I have a couple more, but let's turn to this great one from the audience, and I think it relates to JC, and it relates to folks who've been through the experience of recovery, and it's what role colleagues and friends have when they see a friend with an addiction, even if that friend seems successful despite the addiction. So as the story of Stephen in this play is like, he's rocking it. He's like, does this look like screwing up? No, it does not. And I mean, there, statistically speaking, in the world, most people sitting in any audience have felt like they are JC or Stephen or the folks that surround a person struggling with addiction, if they have not themselves. It's unusual to find someone who hasn't been touched somehow by addiction. So the question is, so what is it? And I think there's lots of ways to answer, but what are thoughts y'all have? Let's start with the experience of playing JC. We ask the character JC now, from the wisdom she's been through, you know.
Oh gosh. I don't know, and I'm definitely don't feel educated enough to like speak on this in like an official way. But I will say what I think JC, I don't know. I'm not the person here. What I am proud of for JC, and it's so funny because I don't think she even has any more lines left, but it almost makes me cry, even though I'm like, when we did the play, I'm like off stage, but when Stephen says, day 365, JC starts taking my calls again.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just like, I'm proud of her that she held out that long, and
yeah. Yep. Yeah.
That she had to draw the line for herself and for him too,
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a key point, is that she, in some ways, it's a actually I'll shut up and Joe, what would you say to this? And we can all, and we're owning that I am not a physician either, and so I'm not going to speak as a person who diagnoses. That is not a thing I do. And we are speaking from personal experience. We're going on the record of saying that. It's okay.
I think actually the boss comes to mind for me, and I say that because I think one of my favorite scenes that I'm thinking about is the time that the boss comes into like the office, and it's like, trying to find a way to broach the subject of like, hey, is everything okay? And I don't know. I think it's like in that moment, and I think we're kind of in this moment now where you kind of can't see the forest for the trees, or you don't, because business is booming and it's so good. We don't take the second to really stop and go like, hey man, forget the play, forget the success for a second. Like, if I come to you right now and I feel like you have this problem, like there's a problem, and he does try to do that, but it's because Stephen's so charming and everything is really going, it's, I guess it's just how much more do you dig in and investigate might not be the right word, but how much more do you go like, and what responsibility do you have? I don't really know, but I feel like the boss in that situation, maybe if things were different, maybe could have taken one more step in that moment. I don't know.
So just this is to talking to someone who is like success, like the kind of approaching someone who's having some success, right? It's can be a little. I would say personally, it can be somewhat difficult. I feel sometimes if I've ever done this, it's hard because I am an alcoholic. So it's like you don't want to like feel like you're. Hey, I know, so I'm going to prescribe you with this problem, and of course, I know how to fix it. So that's the that's a way that I'm wary of being. But I think when someone's successful, and if they've come to me, then there's just, I think it's just simply saying like, well, you just have you have just that much more to lose, right? It's going well now. There's no guarantee that it will go well forever. And the odds are it won't. And there's that much more to lose. And it's hard to see that then, like you said, forest through the trees, but it's tricky. Ooh, is it tricky? It's tricky.
So tricky. If there was an easy answer for that one,
yeah.
And it's so if we think about, so obviously I identify most with JC on this one, so I'll completely own that. But it doesn't seem like in the story of Stephen that there's anything magical JC could have said or a line she could have drawn.
Right.
He would have kind of been mad at her that she stopped like, helping him out in the way that in his perspective that he had at that moment, that would have been frustrating to him. But it's unlikely that some magical thing that anybody said to him was gonna boom. I mean, the depth and the intensity of addiction, how thoroughly it takes over the physiology of a person, is just never to be underestimated. So I think it sounds like I get to ask one more question. It's actually like 4 more I want to ask. So I'm going to say, here's my combo last question I'm going to ask. So I'm kind of still dying to know like what you miss most about the staging. I didn't get to see the staging of the New York show. I only saw it at Merrimack. I thought Merrimack did a great job of staging the fall, like early in the first third of the show, where he like tumbles off of a thing and into the hay, except he misses the hay and goes, you know what I'm talking about? Okay. Of course, you know what I'm talking about. But so I missed. So I'm curious,
again?
like what? Sorry. I'm curious if like there's a part of the staging that you missed, but I'm also curious like if it was I don't know, just experiencing y'all's amazing, and I'm not just saying like y'all are fabulous actors, and so experiencing you on film, like getting to see your faces so close, was so great. And I'm wondering if that changed your experience of the performance in a way that was, I'm sure, weird but also positive.
Well, it just proves, I mean, and Sean said this to us last night, but that this play and the story can work in any medium,
Totally.
And Cheryl, because she's just so great. I mean, we were joking around last night. It's like, because we're all dealing with this from like, right, just the technical landscape of like, well, what if my internet drops? And then like, and somehow we got through it. And then, but like after like kind of day one, and I'm not saying it's a surprise because Cheryl's just amazing just amazing. But like when she started to get, we were talking about when she started to get her groove, and then it was like she was like, "Oh, okay, 2 shot here, and then we're gonna bring Genesis back in." And it was like it's just kind of like, "Oh wow!" Like not that I forgot, but like you're just like I'm with people who just are gonna do dope stuff. Like we're gonna get in it, and we don't know exactly. It doesn't matter because like we just want to raise each other up. So that was just, so special.
Awesome.
I what I loved was, there was so much that we could do physically. Like I miss sort of, because we were constantly moving and never off stage. There was a like selflessness. I don't know how to describe it. Like you didn't have time to sort of like prepare for anything. So there was something like that was in your body that kept you out of your head in a way, which was really great. Because it was literally about like putting this down, grabbing that, turning on this line or whatever, that was part of our bodies. And so I realized that when we did the very first day, my body was wanting to still do certain things. And then I was like, oh, we can trust more. So it was scary a little bit because you're like, are my characters starting to look too similar because, we can't sort of stand a certain way, or like, we can't rely on necessarily like the sweater or whatever. But to then be able to trust that we could, like, especially for like the mom and stuff too, to be able to trust that you can think something and the audience is seeing that. You don't have to sort of lean on it physically. And that was really exciting. I think that was the most fun for me, especially with the humor and also with the more serious moments, that we could just really, that just listening was enough, that was fun.
I will say that I do miss, just really quickly, because Joe brought up one of his favorite moments, but like in that moment, he's mopping and he's sweeping up, he's like mopping up,
Oh,
kind of, it would take, we've done all this writing on the literally on the stage, so that always was a great moment for me.
Yeah, I would say I missed writing the chalk writing. We would write on the blackboard, and then the ground was also like chalk, like a blackboard material, so we could write on the ground.
oh, cool.
So not only is like at the end we were cleaning up the ground as well, like kind of restoring the space that we'd messed up the entire time. So I liked that. I missed that. But I remember in the first like rehearsal that I had with these two ridiculously amazing actors, I was like,
For real.
they are both, and I know this because I know them. I was like, oh, they're both like incredible TV and film actors. And I was watching them and I was like,
Man.
oh boy. So I was like, so like my learning curve is gonna be like really quick. So so there was like that kind of like you could be a little more intimate. And I thought of watching Kenneth Branagh play Hamlet in the movie. And I don't know. You remember he did "Now Might I Do It, Pat"? Now I'll do. During when he's imagining killing Claudius in the confessional, when he's and it's like that great moment. Normally when that scene is happening, it's live on the stage in front of 1,000 people, and it's Hamlet saying this thing. But in the confessional, when Kenneth Branagh is doing, he's doing really close and he's whispering it. And I always thought, wow, this is an amazing thing that Shakespeare can be this heightened language all the way out there. But then you can bring it so close. So I thought, wow, this play can be really intimate too, and just make the camera what the audience was. So we started doing that, which I thought was really fun. And just trusting it. Yeah, just trusting that it's all can be there without too much too much of the other stuff that we got to do on stage.
And that is what you brought us. Like, so, it was amazing. And Genesis, one last thing. You said a brilliant thing just before we went on air about just the way in which you said something like the alcohol, or just alcohol is hovers around the edges of many narratives, but then it's say that thing.
Well, yes, I'll just say that again. Which like I said, not being really getting an education, really truly getting an education about addiction as much as I could in this, being able to be part of this. What I kind of realized as an actor and as a storyteller is that the stories, great classic plays that we all kind of come up, reading or having to learn about. Alcohol is always orbiting the thing. It's never being talked about as like you know what I mean. And so I would challenge, please, tell me. But I don't know of another play in my mental Rolodex that actually kind of takes it on, straight up like this, and I think, I'm I want to brag on everybody who is involved in this, because it's just like, tell me another
Yep.
play that actually,
Yeah, yeah, and that's maybe this is a thing to end on too. Is that, and the New York Times Review does a good job of naming it. Like, the story of addiction and recovery is boring in some ways. Like, it's the same, and that's what's maddening and crazy about it, is it's so the same. And I remember flying up to Boston, being like, "Oh please, oh please, oh please, I want this to be." And then it like blew my mind how genuinely funny it is, because that's so tough to do. The writing is so tough to get that right, where it's not glorifying the, oh, it's so great being like the drunkenness. It doesn't glorify it. It names its idiocy, and then shows its destruction, and then has hope, and is genuinely hilarious the whole time. Like, what? It's amazing. Y'all have given everybody an amazing gift in your performances. I feel super lucky that I got to talk to you. I'm just, yeah, like I said, kind of a fangirl. So kind of a lot. A reminder to folks about tuning in tomorrow at 4 p.m. Arizona time. And if you're like me on the Eastern time, I had to like Google to make sure what is the daylight saving Arizona special, blah blah. So for the conversation with the Southern Arizona Psychological Association, Facebook, YouTube, look for instructions on the theater's website, and we will be reconvening tomorrow for that conversation. And it is so great that for the rest of this week, through midnight Friday, folks can access. To me, it's not a reading. Every time I was like, oh, it's a reading. What? That was a performance. What? So share with your friends. Folks, like, we are so appreciative for your performances, and this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.